Hi, welcome to this DCP Web Blender 2.8 beginners tutorial. So let's continue where we left off last time. We'll open up Blender and we'll go to our version 4 of our simulation here, or our animation sequence. And in our last tutorial, what did we do? Let's have a quick look. So we set the camera blur here, and then we did the camera flying through this scene. And then it gets to the end here, and then we've got these spikes popping out, right? And now we want to create the fluid simulation. So we want some fluid coming out of the floor, and then we do some sort of text animation. Maybe we put some object in the background. We can do a few other things here. So let's see what we can do. Let's go to File, Save As, and we'll save it as version 5. So make sure you save it as version 5, and then we'll save it here. And what we want to do is turn off the background for the moment. So to click on this eye, that will turn off the background, because we want to press number 7, which will take us into the top view. And we can see the cameras here, and what we want to do, let's have a look here. We want to position our object, right? So we're going to use the 3D cursor tool here, and what the 3D cursor is, wherever we position that 3D cursor, that's where it's going to create the object. So we want our 3D cursor to be, let's have a look here. The best thing to do is go into solid view, because you can see things a lot clearer in solid view, right? So when we're positioning our 3D cursor, we want it to be roughly sort of in line with this camera, right? So about here, I think about here should be good. That should be pretty good, right? So it's quite close to this object, a little bit further down from this object here, this shard that's coming out the ground, and then it's centered to the camera here. So let's press Shift A. Shift A will allow us to add a UV sphere. So we've got a sphere here now, and we press 0 on our keyboard, and when we hit 0, we'll see that sphere here. And if we use our mouse wheel to rotate it backwards, we'll be able to see the camera dimensions here, and we want to get that sphere more centered. So let's use the move tool, and we'll drag it across a little bit so that it's more centered here, something like this, around this position. And then we want to change that sphere's dimensions a little bit, right? So what we'll do is go into so it's called sphere here at the moment, which is not a very good name for it. So let's call it water fluid, something like this, yeah? We'll call it water fluid. Let's go to File, Save, and then we'll go to its properties, the object data, and we want to scale it out. So let's scale it out. Let's see. Really, we want to set this up as let's have a look here. So we want to make this we'll set it to around 8. Let's set it exactly on 8 on the x-axis, and then we'll set the y-axis to 2.5, or the y scale, and then the z scale, we'll set that to around 2.5. So we've got this object here. Best thing to do is press the letter N on your keyboard, and then we want to lock camera, not to the ground or this stuff. We want to lock it to the water fluid, so water fluid here. So whenever we rotate the camera, it's going to be locked to this object here. Now we can, there's a few different ways to turn this into a water simulation or fluid simulation, but we do it the easy way. So we just go to Object, Convert, Quick Effects, and select Quick Fluid here. So that will convert it to a fluid object. Now what we want to do is let's see. Let's click on this fluid and go to its this water fluid here. Let's go to the physics, and in the physics, the volume we'll set to shell, and then we'll set the z-axis to around 20, something like this. We'll play around with these settings to see what works well for us, and then we can click on the fluid domain, and the fluid domain is too small. You can see like it's quite it's going to only be a small sort of space. So if we were to move our mouse, you can see it's only, or move the timeline cursor, it's only taking up a little bit of space here. So what we'll do is increase the width and the height of it. So let's set the scale. So we'll go to the fluid here and go to the object data, and the scale, we want to increase it. You can probably see this, it might be a little bit hard to see, but we want to set the scale to around, let's set it to around 30, so 30 wide, and then we'll set the y-axis to around 20, and the z-axis we'll leave it at 4.5. So it's covering more space now, the fluid, and if we press 0 on our keyboard, it's going to take up more space. Basically, that's what we want, right? Now what we need to do is go to the fluid domain and go to the physics settings here, and we need to set the resolution. Let's set it to 120, and the preview we can set to 120 for now, and the start time and the end time. So what these are is we need to tell Blender how long is this fluid simulation going to last. And if we're running at 60 frames a second, and let's just say we start this fluid simulation at around, really there's no point in starting the fluid simulation all the way back here because it's never going to get seen. It's going to get seen around here, right, around frame, let's say frame 350. So 350 to 600, let's just do some basic maths here. So we've got 600 frames, let's minus the 350 that we've used up here, that gives us 250. And if we divide that by 60 frames, that gives us 4.1 seconds, right? Between here and here will be around 4.1 seconds. So what we'll do is set the end frame here to 4.2. We'll give it a slightly more. So it's going to calculate the fluid simulation between this point here and that point here. Now the speed, we can adjust this, but we're going to set it to something quite fast because we don't want the fluid to be slow. So we set it to around 25, and then the offset, because we set it to, because we want it to start at frame 350, we're going to offset it to minus 350 here. So that's the actual first frame. It's going to start baking this dynamic here. Then let's see. Let's go to boundary, and we want to set this to free slip. So the fluid will just move freely rather than like sticking to stuff, let's say. So we go to bake here, file, save, and then click bake here. Blender's going to go and calculate that fluid simulation. That will take a little bit of time. So I'm just going to leave it baking. You're free to fast forward this bit of the video tutorial, but I'll explain a couple of things about baking and why we use that. So if you can imagine, every time you open up this Blender file, if Blender had to calculate how this water is going to flow, it's quite a lot of work for Blender to be doing, right? Or even your machine to be doing. It's not really Blender's doing that, but it's your processor and your RAM and all that stuff that's helping to make these calculations. So when we bake something, really what we're doing is telling Blender, work out how this fluid is going to flow and then save it to memory. So next time we come back to open up this file, we don't have to recalculate the trajectory of those water particles or how they're flowing, right? So baking is quite important, and you can bake fire and smoke like we've done in previous tutorials, and we can bake fluid as well. If you look at my YouTube channel, you'll find another tutorial on fluids, a much more in-depth tutorial. So if you want to learn more about fluids, check out that tutorial. So let's see how this all worked out. So when we get to this frame here, we'll see this fluid flowing out, right? And right now it's doing a lot of its flow going downwards, right? So let's try and think about this. We might have to adjust this slightly. So let's go back to the fluid here, and I think we have to adjust this Z-axis. I don't think this is right. So let's try and set it to -20. So it's in the opposite direction, and let's see what happens. So we're gonna have to bake it again. Let's do rebake. Fortunately, when you change things in Blender, you have to be a bit patient and bake things again, and you have to experiment with it, right? So I think we want the fluid to be flowing in the opposite direction. That's what I think what we want. So we'll test this. We set it to +20. Let's set it to -20. Hopefully the fluid will be moving in the upwards direction this time. That's what we want. And we'll see what happens. Okay, that's fully baked now. So let's move forward. Now we can see the fluid is much better for us. This is what we want. It's a bit hard to see because the actual fluid itself has been generated under the floor. You can see underneath here, here's the fluid, right? We don't want that. We want it to be above the floor. So what we'll do is move to frame 350. That's the first frame where this fluid starts to get produced, yeah? And let's move to the surface, and really what we want to do is hit the record button and drag this fluid so that it sits above here like this. So now in theory, let's see, it's still quite low, so we have to move it up a bit more here. We could even move it up a touch more. Let's undo that, Control Z. So we want to move it up on this frame. I mean, we can play around with this, right? We don't have to, let's see. So on this frame, it's quite high up here. So maybe we'll move that down to about this position. And between frame 350 and 360, so quite, well, 380, let's say. So only a few frames, we'll drag it so that the fluid is above the floor. Now the best way to do that is really press number 3. If we press number 3 and then go into wireframe, we should be able to see the floor here, right? This green line will be like the floor. So we want to drag this fluid so it sits here, just slightly under the floor, slightly underneath it. So if we go back into the solid view and rotate back around, let's see, our camera is back there, right? So we'll press 0, we can see what the camera sees now. And when the camera goes over this little ridge, we'll be able to see this fluid here, like this. So this is exactly what we want. Now the only problem is, on this frame here, 348, or even 349, we've got this big block here. So if we were to render it, F12, we would actually see that solid block of the fluid before it starts to calculate. So we want to drag this so that it sits under the floor at this frame on 349. Because then on frame, let's untick this record button now. So in theory, right now, from the first frame, that fluid dynamic, that big block you can see there in yellow, is under the floor. And it will get to frame, let's see, frame 349, and then on frame 350 the fluid will show, and then it will still continue to show, and you'll get these, like, what you call it, water particles and stuff flowing out, and then it will continue at this frame here. It's at its top level, and it will just continue to flow out. And then we can move the camera around, we can do all sorts of stuff. So let's see, let's get like a nice frame, something like this, and we'll press F12. And you can see it's like this silver type sort of material. It's reflecting all of the light. I think it's going to look pretty good. We'll probably subdivide this fluid when we bake it. We don't want to do that right now. We'll subdivide it a bit later. it'll be a bit wiser to do that because it's going to affect the rendering here. So our fluid is pretty much done. What we can do is we can probably leave the camera locked on there for now, onto this fluid, because that's a pretty good place to lock it, because we're going to do the text part, right? So let's see. What we'll do now is let's press N on our keyboard, and what we'll do, let's just go back here. So I think this is going to be good. Let's F12 here and see what it looks like. So we'll have these like pause down here. Really what I want to see is how much space it's taking, right? So I think that's going to be pretty good. And where it's quite flat around the edges, it's not going to matter too much, I don't think, because really from the camera's perspective, it doesn't really see these edges, any of the fluid off the sides here. So what we'll do is let's just save this, and we'll go to our web browser, and let's go to free commercial fonts. So we'll go to his website called Free Commercial Fonts. I'll put a link to this in the YouTube description. In the search, I'm going to type in alien, A-L-I-E-N, alien, and then you've got these like crazy alien fonts, right? So let's see if there's anything good in here. I did use one of these before. Here, this one here. Let's go back one. We want something that's actually readable, right? So something like this font here. This one here I'm going to download. So I'll click download here. Let's just drag this and minimize this. So in the folder, here you can see the cache fluid, right? So this is the cache for the fluid that we baked before. Let's just drag that zip file into here. So we'll grab this zip file and drag it in here. We can close down the browser. Let's just right click and extract it. You can use 7-zip, any extraction tool. And we'll delete the zip file, and we'll name this to font. Let's name it to font. And we can close down that folder and open up Blender, and we'll press 0 on our keyboard so we see what the camera sees. Make sure you've turned off your record button, right? You don't really want that to be on. What we'll do actually is press number 7. So we're going to top view, and we're going to press Shift A, and we're going to insert a text object, right? So here's our text here, right here. Now what we'll do is just zoom in with our mouse. We'll hit the tab key, and then you can type in anything you like. I'm going to type in A-L-I-E-N, aliens. Let's do S, aliens, right? Kind of looks like an alien planet, so let's do that. Let's press the tab key. Then that takes us back into the object mode. So tab allows us to edit the text, and then tab again will take us into object mode. Now we want to go to the alien text, and we'll set this text up. So let's set the font first. So we'll click on the font here, click on the folder here, and we'll go to the font and we'll select it. Now we've got this alien type text. Let's zoom in a little bit here. I think we need to space it out a little bit more, so we'll increase its size anyway. Let's set this, the sizing will work that out in a second, right? But we'll leave it at around 3. That might be too big, but we'll check in a minute. And then the character spacing, I think we need to space it out slightly. Just space it out by 1.1. This is for you to experiment with as well. The geometry, we'll set the extrusion. So let's position it. Let's position it first. Go object, set origin, geometry to origin. So that will move it to the center point here. We should really at this point press the letter 0 on our keyboard. That takes us to the camera view, and then we've still got the text selected. So we'll press R on our keyboard, the letter R, to rotate it. Press X and then 90. Now we can see the size of the text here, and it's way too small, right? So let's drag it up so we can see it a bit clearer. Now we know that this is what the camera is going to see. If we press F12, we can see the text here, and we want it to be much bigger than that, right? So we will go to the sizing and let's increase it. We want it to be pretty big. So it's set to 10 at the moment. Let's go to set geometry to origin here, and we'll drag it up a bit more. Let's see what size it looks like now. So that's going to be a pretty good size for us. I reckon that's a good size. So let's close this. Let's go to File, Save, and then we'll middle mouse click and pan around. So really we should set the camera or the viewport to pan around this text. So let's press the letter N and text here. Let's name it text aliens. So try and give your objects a sensible name. So it's called text aliens. So we'll click here, type in text, and then we've got text aliens here. So now the viewport is going to rotate around this object rather than the fluid that it was set to before, and it's much easier to rotate and see it. Right, and we want it at an angle like this. We'll go back to the object data and we'll go to the geometry, and we'll extrude it to, I reckon, we want it to be too thick, around, I think maybe 0.7 seems to be pretty good, right? So the extrusion is set to 0.7, and then the resolution for the bevel we set that to 0.02, and the resolution was set to 2, so the depth here and here. Okay, now what I want to do finally in this tutorial is go to the render view, and we'll press the letter N to close it. And what we would do is, let's go back and turn our background on. So our backgrounds are right at the bottom of this list here. Let's turn that on. So we'll get our background back again. We'll press the letter N on our keyboard, sorry, the letter 0 or the number 0 to see the camera view. This is what the camera is going to see. And we need to decide, is that text sort of in the center? Is it a little bit off to the side? I think it's off to this right side a little bit. So we're going to move it to the left a little bit here. You can position it wherever you like. I want it to be kind of equal distance from the sides here, and I reckon that's about right for me. You have to kind of eyeball it and see what you think. And then finally, let's click on this text aliens, or the alien text, and go to the material and go to new, and let's set that transmission all the way up, and we'll bring the roughness down to about here, and then we'll press F12. So that will be our alien text here, and you can set it to a specific color. You can give it a bit of a base color, right? So you might want to give it a bit of a blue, maybe a bit of purple. I think that looks pretty cool. You can pick any color you like. It can be green, so you can play around with these colors. I think I'm going to go for like a bit of a purple color, because we've got purple objects in the background, and I think that will work pretty well. So let's see it like that. That's that done. Now I think for this part of the tutorial we're pretty much done. Really, in the next part, what I want to do is animate this text. So as this fluid is flowing out of this ground, I want to have this text kind of come out of the ground as well as this fluid dynamic is working. And then we're going to probably apply some particle effects to this alien text, and then we want to put some sort of object maybe in the background. We might leave it plain, we might put something there, I'm not quite sure. But I think we're going to end this part of this tutorial here. So let's go to File, Save. Let's just see what we've done so far. So let's go back to the first frame, and we can click the play button, and we'll see where we are right now. And sometimes it's worth turning off the overlay here, so you can almost see what the final render is going to look like. So I think that's working out pretty well. I think when we finally render this out, it's going to look pretty cool. And we want to play around with the lighting a little bit, maybe in the next video as well. So let's go to File, Save. I'm going to pause it here, and we'll close this down. Let's just make sure we save it, and then close it. And I hope you enjoyed this part of the tutorial, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.